we are facing a very dramatically changing situation when it comes to urban planning in China. As we mentioned earlier, enormous amount of population are moving into the towns and cities, and that is a huge issue when it comes to city planning. Professor Fu, you have been researching about the governance issue, and this, of course, applies to the issue of governance.
Well, you mentioned two-dimensional city. One is above the ground, the other is under the ground. But for a city that is good for human living, I think for some down distance you need to build subways, public transportation. But it would be also good within above the ground. Then you build areas where people can walk from point A to point B. If a city both above the ground and underground are the city built only for cars, now all else be equal, this is not great. So we need to have new thinking about what a better city so we can build. In other words, if we look at the past 20 years, we have built cities primarily in the physical dimension. And now we need to consider more of the human dimension.
Very interesting. Ms. He, you're coming from Hong Kong. Of course, it's a very densely populated city. How has city planning been debated in your history in Hong Kong? How much of inspiration do you think, in any way, that could be providing to many of the cities and towns now being built and being planned here on the mainland?
Well, I just moved to Hong Kong for less than a year, but based on my observation and my reading of the literature, I think there's a lot of things we can really learn from the urban planning and design from Hong Kong. Basically, Hong Kong is a very special city with very scarce land resources, so they tend to use the space very creatively. For example, they have very dense road network and very small scale of residential development and also a mixed use. So in this aspect, they have been very successfully promoting the social mix, and also in terms of sustainability, in terms of energy use and creative use and efficient use of the urban space. One example is the podium development model in Hong Kong. The ground floor is open for public use. It usually used for commercial and public road and streets. And above the road, there is some lifted development like rooftop garden and also residential development. So on the one hand, it can create more spaces for living and different urban uses, but also it does not affect the urban transportation, would not create the problem of congestion which had been faced by many large Chinese cities.
Right.
And one thing also like to mention. Yes.
Okay, quickly finish your point and go to another guest. Please go ahead.
Sure. I would want to highlight the institutional design of the planning and legal system. What I gave was some very concrete example, but more profoundly is the institutional foundation and institutional design of the planning system, because in Hong Kong, the statutory planning has its legal status, so it can provide some protection for the planning making process. Once the plan has been approved, we will provide guidance, and also it has a legal status to protect the benefit of the general public and prevent it from violating by some private developers and other private interests.
I see.
So that is what I want to highlight. Yeah.
Great. Dr. Wei from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, what about you? I mean, you've been doing American research in America for a long time. It has been providing China with a lot of case studies about failures and success, and even about the capital city of Beijing. There has been debates about should they follow the model of Washington, D.C., or should they follow, a metropolitan city like New York, very diversified. All of these could be interesting ideas. What do you think at this development stage in China? What can we draw from the U.S. history, and how much inspiration can they provide us now?
Yes, the Chinese people always want to learn from the good experience from the strongest one. That's why Chinese people always want to learn something from U.S. As we know that since 1980s, U.S. has a new movement. It's the new urbanization movement. That means that people can have a good neighborhood relationship because we can meet our neighbors by walking, not
Yes,
by
indeed.
car. Yeah. So because in the past, the U.S. also suffered now from the big city disease. And nowadays, they just rethink about such kind of city design, city. So now it is also high time for us to rethink about our urban plan. We should not suffer too much from the big city disease, and we should have the sustainable development of the city. Not only a big city, but how can make the urban people's life happier, healthier.
More comfortable.
Yes.
Professor Fu, I have to go back to you because this is interesting. People argue in different ways. Both of the other two ladies have talked about we need to have a vision. It's very crucial, an institutional building in terms of how to have city planning in China. But the argument is, well, Chinese cities develop very fast. We have dramatic changes in our population makeup, and also we have dramatic economic changes. So will that be possible? Secondly, institutional establishment, that also goes with the change of time as well. Well, one institutional establishment has not been done properly yet, another change already happened. You have to keep up with it. So it seems that we're always struggling, try to do things within 1 year what others have been doing for 20 years or even 30 years. Professor Fu, what about that dilemma?
But with a good vision, drawing upon best practice internationally, globally, you can reduce the potential problems you were talking about. In the case of the United States, for instance, my observation is that if you look at the country as a whole, there is less of concentration of power up and down the country. In other words, Washington, D.C. maybe is a city of political power. New York, commercial power.
Different
Hollywood,
functions.
different functions. When you have the spread of powers in one place, you do not have an ultra high level of concentration of power that would make the city too densely populated. It's not good. So contrast with that, if you look at the city of Shanghai, look at the city of Beijing, in Beijing in particular, it's a concentration of power of every dimension: political power, economic power, educational power, cultural
Yes.
power. So it's very difficult to manage. So the countrywide, we need to think a deconcentration of power, such that each city is a good city. Now, another model that I'm interested in is European models. European models where you see cities like museums, combining history with modern affinities. Rome, for instance, Paris, these cities also give people a good feeling that you can go from one place walking distance.
Well, having said that, though, there were debates in China back in the year 1949 when the new China was established about China's capital city, Beijing, for example, its city planning. At the time, the mind was concentrating more on construction, on so-called modernization. However, the preservation of the old culture seemed to be not the biggest priority. But time changes, and people realize, well, maybe the history is something that we should really cherish. However, it is very hard to go back anymore. So, Ms. He from Hong Kong, what do you make of that? Because Hong Kong, even though it is a city relatively newer than many of the other cities in China, but still it has its own historical background as well. So I know there's debates also inside Hong Kong about how to preserve the old when you need to have a huge important infrastructure projects being built inside the city. And that speed seemed to be very slow. There were complaints about that, about not deciding on anything. So once again, this debate, the past, the present, the timing, and also the efficiency and the fairness, responsibilities.
Well, in Hong Kong, yes, indeed, there has been a lot of debates on how to balance, preserve the history and promote the modern development, because Hong Kong is a space where land is very scarce. So sometimes they have to be trade-off. So in the past, they have done something not so wise. For example, they destroy some of the historical development historical building, but recently the idea of preserving the history, to rediscover the history, has been raised. The consciousness has been raised. So they have tried to struggle a balance between economic development and historical preservation. So this is an ongoing debate, but sometimes the preservation part ideal has been displaced by some private interests.
I see.
Yeah,
well,
that's quite sad to observe. Yeah.
Trade-off, paradox, balance. These are the key words we always use. But you know, Miss Wei, here in Beijing, it's easier said than done, isn't it? There would be so many interest parties involved on one project, and not to mention the planning of a whole city. Shed some light for that. For us.
Yes, nowadays we'll find that the city plan will always encounter the movement of friendship. And what it means that if we have a dangerous factory built in certain area, the neighborhood residents will join against it. So we should emphasize the public participation of the urban plan, not only by the good intention of the government, without the public participation. Otherwise, the public will not accept it. But just as you have emphasized that we have the interest groups, how to balance different interests of the different groups. So we should have some consultative mechanism, and we should have the negotiation organized by the government, by some NGOs, by some civil societies, and by some commercial institutions, and so on. So we should have a community of all the citizens.
Well, it's beautifully said, but when it comes to implementation, it could be quite difficult. Once again, this issue of efficiency, the issue of fairness, and whose say is it? Who will have a final say? Whether the court will be everything resolved over there. That's always been debated. Professor Fu, what do you think about it?
Well, efficiency can be a very elusive word. Efficiency for what? For the deeper values you have, or just for money? Then you have different arguments. What is important at the fundamental level is we need to have good universities. It's not just a specialized university, it's a business school, it's a part of a university. It's important. If a university is only a business school, then the kind of design we have probably is not very good. It's profit-driven by and large.
So what you're saying is you need to change people's mind.
We need, education is very important, especially for those decision makers. They need to have liberal arts education, combining humanity, arts, and sciences, such
this
that.
Is a long-term project you're talking about, Professor,
well,
but very important, of course.
The progress of human society is a matter of degree. So the truth is there, we are getting there. So have a sense of degree is very important.
All right.
We should join hands in the efforts of moving from an ugly reality to a better place.